following message is transmitted.
Dorian, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I was informed about your YouTube channel by one of my students, and then I started watching your videos, and I thought, oh my God, these are fantastic. And they're a departure from the normal occult videos that you see on YouTube in a number of ways, which I thought were spectacular. Number one, you're clearly not attempting to gain followers just to manipulate them, which is something we see a lot of in the occult sphere. And number two, you really put a lot of emphasis on being articulate and clear and explaining things in a way that's accessible, which I also try to do. So yeah, I love your channel. And it's a new take. Like you've done some videos on goetic stuff and demonology and all of this, but you seem to be putting it together in a very, very cohesive package, which again, uncommon. So how did you get here? Tell us who you are, a little bit about, your story and how you came to be doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. It really started around, I'd say almost 5 years ago. Of course, I had background growing up in a very, traditional religious household. I was raised, doing, church work, ministry type stuff. And so as I got older, I went into like pastoral type stuff. So for a long time, I was a Christian minister. And then I want to say around 2019-ish, I started to kind of see different kind of holes in the system, so to speak. I started deconstructing my faith a bit. And then it eventually led me into kind of studying spirituality and religion and even occultism on a more like broad scale. I had a lot of different experiences, kind of dabbling with stuff like that. And then eventually, different things happened in my life that I kind of go into on my channel a bit about different spiritual experiences I had, like different out of body type things, different encounters with entities, different things that they told me, messages, that I really took to heart and that I carried with me. And those things really at that point shaped who I became. And so I really became just ravenously hungry for anything I could learn about these entities, about this, this whole new world that I've just kind of been dropped into. I felt like a fish out of water. And for so long, I had been taught, these things were bad, these things were wrong, yada, yada, we've all heard it. And I started to kind of, see behind the wall, so to speak. And since then, I have been working on developing kind of my own practice or tradition. Of course, I'm not. I don't have behind me, 30 years of experience like a lot of other people. But in the small amount of time that I have been on this, this path, I have felt like I've really refined kind of who I am. And so that has led me into areas of what we call theistic Satanism, or some people call it Luciferianism. There's a lot of different terminology that gets thrown around in it. But I really became interested in demonology, or demonolatry, I should say, which is, the practice of working with demonic entities and, some of the darker, nastier things. And so I was fascinated by that. I was fascinated by some of these encounters I was having with these entities who had very distinct personalities and distinct messages that they gave me, and I just could not get enough of it. So I ended up kind of realizing I'm kind of in over my head. I need to kind of get some more people on my side to kind of bounce ideas off of and learn from. I needed mentorship, that kind of thing. And so I was mentored by a woman. Her name is Rose Rozier. She is a very renowned psychic medium kind of in our region here in Ohio. And she was a student of Raymond Buckland, who we know is a big name in Wicca. And so she kind of, while she wasn't a Satanist, so to speak, she taught me a lot about kind of grappling my psychic expansion, kind of learning to tackle that in a safe way. She kind of helped break down and explain some of the things that were happening to me. She taught me tarot. She taught me lots of different forms of divination, and she taught me a lot of like the basics of witchcraft. I remember some of my first books I ever received on any kind of occult topic came from her, and so she was a really big part of like my upbringing in that way. But eventually, I did kind of go into my own niche, which is like I said, like the demonology type stuff. And so I ended up still seeking more people that were kind of in that area of expertise. I formed an online group called Temple Vesperitas, which is kind of it's kind of just a hodgepodge of lots of different people from all different kinds of left hand path practices. Most of us consider ourselves, theistic Satanists or venerate like Lucifer or what have you. That's really like the largest like user base within the temple. Most of the presence is online, but I do go to different metaphysical and occult events and set up booths and things and talk with people. And we're hoping to eventually start a physical temple, like a physical location, and kind of just expanding this project we've been working on. And so far, it's been really, really, really enriching. We have really found some amazing research. We've been developing different systems of magic, kind of tying together different forms of Satanism that perhaps or might be incomplete. We have kind of run into that. And as we have picked up a lot of people that are very interested in Satanism, they are kind of, we've been noticing they're kind of, they don't really know where to go. They don't know where to start or to begin. A lot of people say, you need to start with like Wicca or traditional witchcraft or something of that nature before you get into, some of the more darker things, just because there's a lot of background work that you have to do to kind of understand the mechanics of like working with demons, for example. And so we've been kind of working on creating that platform for people to step into that if they're new, if they have no prior experience, and be able to help them develop their own practice, their own traditions, their own, spiritual methods, that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like you're really doing this the right way, which I really appreciate. Um, in terms of having to begin with Wicca, or I mean, I don't think you need to begin with Wicca or traditional witchcraft. You do need to begin with foundations, but those
Yeah,
foundations don't need to revolve around any particular set of symbols. And that I think is one of the big misunderstandings that we have in the world of occultism is, which set of symbols do you resonate with? And people turn that into something much bigger than what it is.
yeah,
Um, and so from my point of view, what I do is based on the chaos magic as kind of written about by Peter J. Carroll, but I also take a wild departure from that is that I'm also not an atheist, right? I
yeah,
believe in an objective spiritual realm, and I believe in that realm based on science. And so when Pete and I talk about this kind of thing, our only real disagreement is that I believe that string theory is correct and he does not. And
right,
that's it, right? It's
right,
not about like which gods are the right gods. It's like,
right,
nah.
absolutely,
That's a silly argument because now we're talking about symbols.
yeah,
So when we have these encounters with entities and deities, I feel personally that there's a fine line between really understanding that they are much larger than the symbols that we ascribe to them, but also that the symbols are very powerful and very useful.
yes,
So
absolutely,
when you talk about demonolatry and the darker left-hand path side of things, this is an issue where I find there's a tremendous amount of confusion because darkness does not mean evil, right? Those
exactly,
are just very different things. And demon does not mean demon depends on who you're talking to. So what I would call a demon is your own feelings of self-doubt and I'm not good enough. Good things don't happen for me. Those thoughts, those are your demons. The entities which are described in the Goetia are ever present archetypes of consciousness that are not evil. They're your emotions in a large way. Or, Aleister Crowley wrote in his introduction to the Goetia that the demons are portions of the brain, and I think he was almost correct, essentially, that they're more portions of the mind than they are the physical brain, but there's correlation there, of course.
Yeah,
Um, and so detangling all this is incredibly important to the future of occultism. Because from my point of view, what I really believe is that the future of occultism is a merging with science, and that's not
absolutely.
nearly as far off as people think it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a tremendous amount of overlap, and I think 50, 100 years from now, we'll have a much greater grasp on kind of the scientific implications of occultism.
Yeah. And what I think occultism really is an ancient roadmap for how to use your mind correctly.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if you don't use your mind correctly, there can be tremendous repercussions. And it's wild that we don't, we're born into this world with no instruction manual. Well, occultism, that's the instruction manual, right? But it is veiled in symbolism, and words get confused with other words and things get twisted around. One thing that I believe to be just in your face obvious is that the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, is demonstrably, by definition, the Christian devil. And that
Yeah,
Lucifer is clearly the good guy in the story of the Garden of Eden. I don't know how you
absolutely.
could read that story and come to any other conclusion. I don't
Yeah,
get it.
yeah.
But the power of symbols, the power of a preacher telling someone, well, that's bad and evil, that has a real effect on people, which obviously you know all about. You grew up in it. So,
Oh,
my question for you then is, what was that like? What was that transition like for you? Was it traumatic? Because I imagine it would be.
oh, absolutely. It was dramatic. It was. I mean, I had to basically reconstruct everything I believed in and knew, and for so long I was obsessively, a minister. That was my life. I traveled, I preached, I taught Sunday school, I did all kinds of things, and it not only did it change what I believed in, but it just changed my life. It changed, my everyday, things I did, and it changed the people I was around. It changed the people I associated with, and it vastly changed my relationships with my family members. There was a lot of there were falling outs. There were, issues where I had to move away, from the kind of the town area I grew up in, to kind of, escape, so to speak. And so it very much was it was a very turbulent time in my life, and there were times that I doubted, this path. I thought, well, all this turbulence, all this resistance that I've been getting, maybe this isn't the right thing for me. Maybe that this is the wrong, choice that I'm making with my life. And something just kind of in my gut pulled me to just keep going and see what happens. And
Yeah.
I did that. And that was probably the best decision that I've made in the last 10 years, probably. I, for one thing, I matured as a person. I expanded a lot of like my knowledge of different faiths around the world. I became more tolerant of different things, more understanding, more able to connect with people of different walks of life. Versus just the little, grain of sand that I focused on, for so long. Now I could see the beach, and
Mhm.
that changed everything. That changed everything. And yeah, it was absolutely traumatic. It was a total shift of everything I knew. But as I began working with these different entities, they did show me things about my mind, about my like inner self, different things that were repressed, were very hidden, things I didn't know about myself. And I had to do a lot of shadow work, a lot of pulling that out, and that was a very ugly, messy process. But at the end of the day, I thanked those entities for it. The turbulence, the chaos, the everything just kind of cracking and breaking and shutting down. It paved the way and created basically like a blank canvas for something entirely new to be created. And that's kind of where I am now. I'm finally starting to see like the fruits of all of that pain that I went through now. So yeah, it was worth it. But for somebody who is faced with the same scenario, I would encourage them to just hang on and see what happens.
Yeah, hang on and see what happens, or seek mentorship. And I think it's great that you're
Yeah,
providing some of that, right, with what you're building. I run a number of programs. I wish that were available when I was a kid, because I had to figure
yeah,
this out all on my own. And I remember there was a period of time for about 2 years. This intersected with COVID, where I, in my mind, was trying to figure out, okay, are the gods objectively real? Or are they archetypes of consciousness in the Jungian sense? Or are they,
yeah,
the Anunnaki space beings? Or are they
yeah.
the zodiacal planets? And it caused me like deep depression to not know the
Oh,
answer to that. I felt like
yeah,
I was banging my head against the wall. But at the end of that 2 years, I reconciled all of it and developed the system of magic that I teach now. Right. And
mhm,
like it
yeah,
was worth it. But I don't want anyone else to go through that if they don't have to.
yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, that's one thing that I try to do is I try to be the person for other people that I wish had been there when I went through this.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I work on with the temple is I mean, we work as a support group, when we're not teaching magic, we're acting as a support group for people. And
Yeah.
that's probably to me one of the singular most important things of what I do because this thing is a lot bigger than most of us, and it's a lot more complicated, and it can be very messy at times. But I have learned that and as we dabble with all of our different theories of what these beings are, whatever we believe about them, they're around us, they interact with us, they
Yeah.
are a part of this existence. So it doesn't
Yes.
matter what really we think about them, whether they're real, whether they're fake, whether they're a mental construct or whatever. These are, and like you said, symbols. These are very complex symbols that have been around since antiquity. They're primordial. They've been around with humanity since we were early primates. Basically, that's what I believe.
Yeah.
And the more we evolve, so too do those constructs,
Mhm.
whether they're egregores, whether they're actual entities that exist outside of us. And I kind of believe a little bit of everything, that it's a lot more nuanced than just one thing or the other, that they are probably both
Yeah.
external and internal. So that's kind
Yes.
of where I fall. But whatever we believe, they're a huge that's what this is all about, is just learning to kind of grapple with that in a safe way that doesn't break you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it needs to be personal. And this is where my big objection to organized religion comes in. It's not a one size fits all. I think that if there's 8 billion people in the world, then there should be 8 billion religions, right? And
Yeah,
they can have a tremendous amount in common, but there isn't a one size fits all that works for everybody. And every time you try to implement that, it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster, right? And I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody here. In small groups, religions are great as long as there's the freedom for everyone within that religion to have contradicting beliefs. So one of the things I tell all my students all the time, because one of my biggest concerns is that we are never perceived as any kind of cult, that I am never perceived as any kind of a guru, because I'm not, right?
yes.
Please tell me if you think I'm wrong, argue with me. Let's talk about it and maybe we'll learn something together. I think that's tremendously important, because this idea that you have, let's say, a spiritual experience, and I think this is how all religions eventually get formed, right? You have one spiritual experience and you go tell everyone else that this is the objective truth. And it's fine
Yeah,
if it works for a small group of people, or if it works, if they take that truth and like that resonates with me, but they think about it a little bit differently, right? But then when you start implementing the rules, like, okay, you have to behave this way and believe this and think this and say this, you get big problems.
yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with 8 billion people. There needs to be 8 billion religions. I think the best approach is uh, not necessarily like it being eclectic, but just being able to decide, like being able to pull from different things, decide, analyze and decide what it is that you resonate with and belongs, kind of in your heart, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that the taking of bits and pieces from here, from this religion, from that tradition, and saying, hey, if you put these two things together, it creates a coherent, kind of structure that
Yeah.
really makes sense, is incredibly valuable. And so perennialism is, I guess that's the underlying philosophy of what I do, is that There's truth in all religions, and there's nonsense in all religions. And you just got to
Absolutely.
pick out what the truth is and what the nonsense is and construct something for yourself that really works for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, perennialism is I mean that really I don't call myself a perennialist, but I really think that that is a huge part of what I believe in. I could almost call myself like a satanic perennialist, so to
Oh,
speak.
totally.
But yeah, that's absolutely one of the most enriching paths, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. I mean, for example, the two most influential books that have ever been on my personal practice are the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey and Liber Null by Peter J. Carroll. And I wish I had the chance to ever meet LaVey, but I've talked to Pete a number of times, and we're writing a book together, and so I've gotten a good view of his philosophy. And these are the two most influential books in my entire practice, and they're both atheistic books, and I am not an atheist. I
Right. Yeah.
disagree with both of those two philosophies, but still they're incredibly useful. And you can take so much from them and say this really works for me, but also I'm going to add, my own beliefs in here and make something that is truly personal and works for me. I think that Anton LaVey got nearly everything right in the Satanic Bible except for the part where he's an atheist. That's the part where I'm
Yeah.
like, oh man, you missed the
Yeah.
mark. But at the same time, he didn't miss the mark. He's saying what he believes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I run into that a lot too, like the whole atheistic part of that too. I have a lot of people that come to me and say, I didn't know this form of like theistic Satanism. I didn't know that existed. I only knew about, Anton and like the Satanic Temple and that kind of thing. These were the only brands of Satanism I was introduced to. I thought you had to be an atheist to called a Satanist. And
Oh.
so a lot of what we do, like at my temple, is we kind of deconstruct that and show people, no, Satanism is just as diverse and expansive as any other religion out there. There's
Mhm.
different, I hate to call them denominations, but there's different, categories of Satanism, different types of belief, different, structures of faith within Satanism. And when I met my partner, she was kind of on the same path I was, and I was a little more versed in kind of like the literature of Satanism, so I was able to kind of point to her and say, "Oh, that's what this is called," and she would be like, "Oh, I didn't know that that was a thing. I just thought that was something that I believed in or wanted to follow." So theistic Satanism is people don't really realize that it's out there, but once you kind of go down that rabbit hole, it's like you find this whole network of uh, of people, within that system of belief, and it's really amazing. Some of the ideas I was influenced by, like Thomas Carlson, was a big part of some of the things that kind of grew into my practice. Thomas Carlson, Ball Cadman, a couple of the others like that. They were really instrumental, those practices. And so once I kind of began studying that, I kind of implemented that and the kind of the moral philosophies of like Anton LaVey and like the Satanic Temple and that kind of stuff. Some of the moral humanism, that kind of stuff, and I mixed that with some of the more theistic spiritual stuff and kind of created this new thing, for myself anyway. But yeah, a lot of people, they don't realize that you can do that, and that's a really important part of like us as leaders within a left hand path community, is to show people that you can develop your own form of belief, and there are other options out there.
Yeah, and gosh, and one of the things that I think is central to being, and I hate using these words. Let me see if I can rephrase this because I don't ever want to say that I'm better than anyone in any way, but I do think that a more evolved understanding of occultism, if you follow this path long enough, you will come to the realization that it's just not objective, right? There
Right.
is not one set of this is true.
Exactly.
One of the principal axioms of chaos magic is nothing is true, everything is permitted. And I really believe that.
Yes.
And there isn't some one universal truth that everyone needs to understand. Rather, there is your reality, which is, as a matter of neuroscience, a construct of your mind. It is a cartoon that you're watching right now, right? And we all agree about a lot about the cartoon, but it is a cartoon that your brain is constructing. It's a kind of hallucination. And so when you can really have that realization and grapple with it, you can say, okay, this is all an illusion, or what in Buddhism is called Maya, right? And
Yeah,
then you can start to see, okay, this is all an illusion, and I'm creating the illusion. Then I have a degree over control over the illusion if I want, right? And this is
absolutely.
why learning to lucid dream can lead to learning to, be very adept with magic. You learn to control the illusion to a degree. Um, and I love that stuff, right? But like you miss out on all of that when you say this is the objective truth,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, it's such a constraint.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And reality itself is completely everything is subjective. Morality, reality, everything that we go through as humans is entirely subjective. And so I think one of the greatest deceptions, especially from modern organized religion is that there is this set of objective truth, and if you don't follow it, you are wrong.
Yeah.
So, and that creates this entire psychological dilemma of like like a slave mentality, so to
Hmm.
speak, that you bound to those rules and those norms and those societal, those conventional things. And so, really, when you step into occultism, it deconstructs that and it shows you, oh no, there's actually I am kind of my own god in a sense where I can decree what fits for me and what doesn't. What is subjective and what is my truth, so to speak. So to speak.
Yeah. You know, in terms of physics, if and I personally really resonate with the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, because it's clear to me that, and also panpsychism, that's important part of this. Reality, what we call reality, is a mental experience that you're having, and and you have the ability to choose which mental experience you want to have and aim yourself at it. But those kinds of objective truths and rules will conflict with what you want, or what you say you want, or the kind of experience you want to have. And then all of a sudden you're kind of aimless or lost, or you're trying to follow something that doesn't truly resonate for you, and so it shapes your reality. And not to get conspiratorial here, but this is the ultimate level of divide and conquer.
It is, yeah, it is, yeah, and they're at such a broad scale within our world that it's impossible to escape that. It's turned into this entire, spiritual conflict, spiritual and physical, conflict. And so, yeah, I really think that it's very important, especially in our modern age, learning everything we have from history, from all the witch burnings and all the, persecutions of people like us, that we provide a space for people to be different from
Yeah.
those structures.
Yeah. And to proliferate this information, because if we can do that, if you can change someone's life and help them to realize the degree of power they have, we're going to, as a result of that, create a much better world, because we're going to eliminate a tremendous amount of the victim mentality and despair that plagues people, that keeps them in a place of, well, everything is terrible and life sucks, and so I don't care, right? And that's what I'm really trying to combat, is because it's this stuff, it's occultism that got me out of that way of thinking,
Yeah,
right? And now I just want to
it
provide
is.
that same experience for other people.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it is. Once you get to the other side and you see that for what it is, it's a breath of fresh air. Occultism will liberate you from so many shackles that modern life, through social programming and religious dogma and stuff, have thrown over us as humans, that have put us into these roles that are not natural for us as a species. Some of these things that, say Christianity, for example, things that are forbidden, are natural human processes and desires and things, and to restrict that and forbid that creates this psychological dilemma where that's all you want. It's like a kid, when you tell them not to touch the stove, that's all they want to do. And
Totally.
so it just creates this kind of, it's almost like a curse. And I believe it in an occult sense, it kind of is a curse. It's this mentality that, again, hot wires the mind and puts you
Mhm.
into all kinds of issues.
Yeah, I mean, and I think of a curse as being the same thing as a mind virus, and those are very real ways of
Absolutely.
thinking that can infect you and take over all these different areas of your brain, and all of a sudden they're all aimed in a particular direction, and that direction's not good. And this happens to
Absolutely.
everybody all the time, right? It's wild. So, okay, anyways, I want to change gears a little bit here because there's so many things I want to talk about and we have limited time. But my favorite video of yours, I think, and I haven't watched them all. I've watched quite a few. My favorite one was a video you did on spirit eating. I think that was, really well explained and a really interesting practice. Um, and everyone here, I highly recommend you go watch the video. If you're watching this one, you could pause and come back, whatever, but definitely go check it out. But, I'd love to hear how, after making that video and after having the experiences, how has that practice developed? And, um, what led you to that kind of way of thinking about it?
Well, it was kind of almost on accident that I stumbled upon or that I developed that method, so to speak. I had been working with a lot of different spirits that I was kind of like inviting into my space. Some of them were human, some of them were non-human, and different ways to kind of like carry them with me throughout the day. Because whether I was like traveling or whatever, I wanted to be able. I can't lug up a bunch of occult objects every time I go somewhere, to contact a spirit, So I kind of developed this method of attaching these spirits to me, which is something that a lot of people say is really dangerous and is really it kind of gets like a superstitious kind of stigma to it when I say that to people, but it's not quite as scary as it sounds. Really, so what I do just kind of to kind of go through the process just briefly is say I'll go into like a haunted area, for example, and there's a spirit there that I want to work with or that I want to help in some way. Or sometimes I'll even have spirits that have reached out to me and say, come to this location, I need your help. I've had that numerous times. And so I will go to these locations, I will meet with the spirit, and through their permission, I will bind them to, say, like a piece of food. Usually it's like an apple or something. I'll create a sigil from the name that they give me. I'll carve that into like the apple. I'll anoint it. There's various different ritual processes that go into that. And I'll basically anchor that spirit to that piece of food and then I'll eat it. And that is kind of bringing that spirit into me. And it's almost like kind of like communion. You're taking this piece of food, you're turning it into a spiritual entity. Very much in church. The wine is the blood of Christ, and the wafers are the flesh of Christ, which is also kind of creepy, but
It's deeply creepy. And we'll talk about that in a moment.
yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, I kind of so I started doing this, and this method kind of became more complex and more developed. I started researching like different communion practices throughout different, especially pagan religions. And by chance, at the same time I was studying this, I came across something in some of my studies that was a, a practice in a lot of ancient pagan societies called hierogamos, if I'm remembering the term correctly in that language.
Mhm.
And it is basically, it means holy marriage or sacred marriage. And it was a practice among, especially with like kings in different societies or leaders or whatever, or chiefs. They would want to engage in like an intimate relationship with, a god or a goddess. Usually they believed they themselves were a god or goddess. So they wanted to, partake in the marriage of, marrying another entity. And so they would hire different people who were usually, what were called, like holy prostitutes back then, which was a totally different thing than the modern, uh, prostitute. But
Right.
these were usually very sacred, respected members of the community who partook in these acts with kings and queens in order to kind of perform this ritual. And so these, especially women, they would sort of like embody the goddess, a goddess of whatever pagan pantheon that they're working with. They would call down these entities into their body, so to speak, almost in a less scary type of possession, so to speak. And they would, engage in different marital acts with, the king or queen or whoever. And so that also tied into this, where I was basically transmuting things, bringing down forces, bringing down entities to a very corporeal level, tying them to a physical object, and then partaking of that, bringing that spirit into me in the very same way, just without some of the other steps that they went through. And so it kind of just created this this whole dynamic where I was able to connect with spirits on a much deeper level. I was amazed with some of the clarity I was able to receive messages from spirits when I started doing this. Now, not all of those messages were great. There was a lot of very disturbed spirits, a lot of very spirits that were in a lot of pain. That I was trying to help deal with some of these things that were weighing them down, keeping them stuck in whatever patterns they were experiencing. And so, for a long time, I was kind of working with these spirits on a very like mental or sometimes astral spiritual level to help them work through issues. And eventually, I kind of became obsessed with collecting some of these different entities. Some of them would be very human, some of them would be very not human, like I said. And eventually, it did kind of become a little chaotic. I felt like I was having all these voices, chirping at me all the time. So
Yeah.
I had to kind of set a bunch of boundaries and a lot of house rules, as I call them. So when I would agreement with the spirit, okay, you're going to come with me, I'm going to help you, but these are the ground rules, and if you don't follow them, I'm going to send you back out into a banishment. That, or I'm going to have one of my other spirits that act as guardians, so like servitors, different demonic figures that I pay homage to. They will kind of give you a little kick in the ass, if you don't behave. So I kind of went through a lot of different various stages of chaos and order, just kind of back and forth, trial and error. But it really was a really interesting method to commune with spirits that I had never seen anybody do before.
It really is interesting. I love the video and I love hearing about it just now. I mean, I gotta say I'm a little concerned for you. I mean, like,
Yeah,
are you okay?
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
that's a
Yeah,
lot. That's a lot of spiritual activity to be having going on within
yeah.
you at any given time, right? And it takes a lot to manage that. And so setting up those house rules, I'm sure, is very important. I personally, you know, one of the reasons that I think gravitated towards Norse mythology, and I don't work exclusively with the Norse gods, but I have very closely for the last 2 years, is that they're not loud and in my face like the goetic spirits are. And one of the reasons I don't particularly work with the goetic spirits a lot is not that it's not that I don't respect them or think they're useful. I just don't like it when the lights flicker in my house and there's shit opening in doors and blood, but they love that stuff. They love to make their presence known. And I have a small child, and I don't want
Yeah,
that happening in my house all the time. So I like the Norse
yeah.
gods because they're like, we're here when you need us, but otherwise, like we're far away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah, and it is not for everybody. It's
yeah.
and even besides the whole spirit eating thing, goetic spirits, they are not for everybody at all. For some people like myself, they are amazing. My personality meshes really well with them, and
Mhm.
the goetic spirits are the ones that I work with the most out of all the different pantheons that I kind of dabble in, because I've
Mhm.
dabbled a tiny bit in the Norse pantheon, the Greek, Egyptian, different ones. But the Goetic pantheon is, to me, it's the one that makes the most sense to me, and it's the one that I'm able to communicate with the clearest. I just feel like my personality meshes with demons for whatever reason.
Yeah.
but but yeah, when you are working with spirits and you have a like when your practice is really centric on spirit contact, you're going to have a lot of paranormal activity around you every day.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be hard. You've got to be prepared for that. You have to be tough because weird shit will happen.
Yeah, I've definitely got my wards and my own personal protection magic set up in a way where like my house is free of entities unless I invite them in. That's
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. And I do invite them
that's kind of
in,
what I
you
do
know.
too.
Yeah, I do about 30 minutes of meditation every day. I do 10 minutes every morning with my community, Monday through Friday, and then I do my own, and almost exclusively my meditations are communicating with spirit. That's what I'm looking
Yep.
for, right? I'm looking for new information that's going to lead me to the next level of my practice because as an educator, I feel like, honestly, to be perfectly honest, with my own magical practice right now, I feel like I can create whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. My life can be not whatever I want it to be. It's not like my life is perfect. It's certainly not. But compared to before I did magic, holy shit, right? It's 1,000 times better. And of course, stuff still happens, but whatever. There's more to it than just creating the reality you want, but that is like the large chunk of it. So I could just be happy and like I could just have a practice and just do
Yeah,
my practice. But I've chosen to be an educator, and so I constantly have to be looking for more information so that I can be a better educator, right? So I spend a lot of time in spirit communication looking for new bits of information that I can then incorporate or spread around to my students so that they can be more empowered.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's a worthwhile practice. It can get to be overwhelming at times. But then just the ability to communicate with spirits, right?
Yeah.
One thing that I started doing on accident, and I've told this story on this podcast so many times, I'm not gonna do it again. I'm just gonna briefly, that one time that I was reading tarot at a festival in Toronto, and a client asked me to communicate with a recently deceased loved one, and I've never tried that before, and so I went for it and it worked out quite well, and I've been doing it ever since.
Mhm.
That is incredibly rewarding work, but it's emotionally taxing, and
Yeah.
it drains your energy in a kind of way, and it also invites more spirits of the undead to be attracted to you, right? And nothing wrong with that, but these are formerly human spirits that have wants and desires and curiosities about you and who you are. And I personally just have many wards all around my house because it's like, yeah, just stay
Yeah.
outside. I like you, I
Oh,
want to talk to you, but stay outside.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm up to my teeth in words in my house. So I
Yeah,
know that feeling.
yeah. What in your so in your practice, gosh, I have so many questions. It's hard to even decide which ones I want to ask you. Oh, okay. Here's one thing I do want to touch on because you mentioned it. I want to know your perspective on this. Having gone through the transition you have. I went to church one time in the last decade at the request of a friend because I've already been through that, right? I went through that when I was 15, which is how I got into occultism. But one of the things that is wild to me is that you go into a proper church service and you have a group of well over 100 to 200 people worshiping the image of a man being tortured to death and then participating in this thing where they drink his blood and eat his flesh, and then they go on tirades talking about how the satanic people are eating babies. I'm like, but
Yeah.
wait a minute, which
Yeah.
establishment is it that has clearly demonstrably covered up for a word I can't say on YouTube for the last couple hundred years? And it's the Vatican and the Catholic Church. Y'all got this backwards, right? And I
Absolutely.
wonder if you've learned or gleaned anything from the spirits you work with about that, because to me, as I said in the beginning, Yahweh, the church, the God of the Old Testament, is by definition the devil. And
Oh,
how is
yeah.
it that people don't see this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's one thing that just it it gives me like I have been into a church a few times in the past few years. Never a pleasant experience for me. But I go through the exact same thought process. I look at that cross and I see a torture weapon, and that's what it was. Like if you were an ancient Israelite at the time and you went around sporting a cross, people would look at you like you were crazy because you were
That's like
carrying
walking around with
around.
an AK in your hands. Like, I
Yeah,
will
that's
kill you, is what is it
and
saying?
if Jesus had died through, stab, or whatever, through a sword or through something else, we would be carrying that around as the symbol of,
Mhm.
that religion. So it's really, really, to me, a lot of the Abrahamic faiths, and I mean, this is just my personal opinion, but I think a lot of the Abrahamic faiths are kind of the um, the repressed ego men kind of projected into a construct, an entity, or a religion, so to speak. And with that ego comes a lot of the darkness of humanity, the actual like bad, yucky things within humans. And so, we see a lot of things, and it cracks me up every time I go into church. They always bring up things about, how, in the end times, good will be called evil and evil will be called good and that kind of thing. But a lot of the things that they talk
It's
about to me
happening.
seem pretty evil. You
Yeah,
know?
and also they're giving themselves away. So it says in the Bible, and I'm sure listen, I haven't read the Bible in many, many, many years, so you might know this better than I do, but I know that in the Old Testament it says that the devil will pretend to be God. So why would we
Yes,
not look at the church that exists in the world today that's responsible for genocides all over the world and say that's the devil pretending to be God? But we don't do that. We think the
yeah,
devil's going to show up one day and be like, "Hey, I'm God," ha 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 ha. And it's like, why would you not assume that that's been happening for the last 2,000 years?
exactly. Yeah, and the Gnostics, the early Gnostic Christians, that was what they primarily believed in, was that the this creator God, the God of the Old Testament, was an absolute monster, and that he had created this world kind of as like a prison planet, and I went through a lot of studying like the Nag Hammadi library and the different Gnostic beliefs, and um, really that resonated with me a lot, and I've incorporated a lot of Gnosticism into my practice, bits and pieces, because not all Gnosticism really aligns with Satanism, but
I've done a lot of reading in the realm of Gnosticism, and there's something about it that really does not sit well with me, even though they have
yeah,
the same kind of disdain for the God of the Old Testament, which I understand. But it's the idea that this is a prison planet is so very disempowering, and I can't
yeah,
stand it. Right?
yeah,
I think that the pagans had a much more positive view with animism. I think the world is animistic, that panpsychism is a reality, and that this is a divine realm.
yeah, I agree with
Also,
that.
that there's an evil God that presides over it, but that this realm itself is not inherently evil. So
Yes,
there's a great video by Arith Hager on his channel about world accepting versus world denying views. And a world accepting view is so much more empowering than the idea that, I'm living for the afterlife. And LaVey got really into this in the Satanic Bible. Oh, it's like, you don't know that there's a fucking afterlife. Live for here and
yeah,
now. Don't
yeah,
deny the life you're having now in, hopes that you get somewhere better later. Just have a good time now.
right,
I think
absolutely,
that
yeah,
philosophy is very, very empowering and helpful to people. And also because I absolutely love my life. Why
yeah,
would I want people to have that experience? You can love your life here and then still go to a good place afterwards if that's what happens, but I don't really believe that's what happens.
yeah, yeah,
I think that you reincarnate, and I think that is another conspiracy theory for you. I think that the correlations, the correspondences, the similarities between the character of Jesus and Lucifer are overwhelming, right?
yeah,
And that
yeah,
Jesus, Lucifer was basically twisted into being made the villain, but then also
yeah,
they tell his story through character of Jesus, who they've renamed. Right, both were the Morning Star, both of the planet Venus, both have the same message. And if you read the Gospel of Judas, he even says right there, "You're worshiping the wrong God."
yeah,
Right. So I
yeah,
think that when Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is here and now, what he's trying to tell you is that this is it. This is where we are and what happens. And I personally believe in reincarnation, and I think that what heaven and hell are states of mind for one thing, but also it's the idea that you're coming back here. So if you
yeah,
know that you're coming back here, it is in your best interest to try to make the world a better place while you're here now because you're coming back.
yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I very much agree with the idea of the world not being created as a prison planet, but there is an entity that is trying to ensnare it, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah.
After having accumulated so much power through the belief of humans, is
Hmm.
attempting to subjugate matter and belief and all these other things, attempting to subjugate our spirits, our souls, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
consciousness. But yeah, absolutely. Because I very much believe in. I don't believe in a literal creation tale as you see in the Bible. The world
Yeah.
was created in 7 days. That God waved His hand and grass grew, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I very much believe in. I believe in evolution. I believe in a lot of, but I also believe in. While all of these things were happening on like the material plane, biologically and scientifically and that kind of thing, there were forces, spiritual forces, that impacted and influenced the way these things evolved.
Yeah.
So different archetypal forces, and these could be entities, that existed before humanity. If such a thing happened, or was real. Um, there were different primordial and archetypal forces that kind of impacted our evolution.
Mhm.
Even Prometheus is a very Luciferian figure in my
Yep.
opinion, and the whole idea of him bringing fire from Olympus down to give to humans. Fire
Mhm.
changed the entire course of human evolution. It changed how we formed weapons. It changed how we were able to survive, how we were able to build communities, build civilization, create villages and cities and units of people. And so these different spiritual archetypal forces very much have changed the entire course of history. But the more stock we put into various entities, the more influence they have over our reality. We give
Mhm.
them that power. And so when you have an entity like Yahweh or Jehovah or whatever you want to call him,
Mhm.
who whose primary symbol is a a weapon, and whose entire story is a story of destruction and you know the a very imperialistic kind of approach to other people who believe differently than what his followers believed. When
Yep.
you put stock into an entity like that, it creates this kind of climate on our planet, on our reality, where those kind of entities are going to try to ensnare our species.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that those archetypal forces, so those when I hear the words we were created in the image of the gods, I that's what I think of. That we our psyche, the human psyche is a compilation of archetypal forces, right? And you can see this play out in any pagan pantheon because there's always a god of love, there's always a god of anger, there's always a god of, so on forth and so on. And these are archetypal forces that every human experiences. Right. So
Yeah,
then here comes this one God that's like, no, I'm the only God. Get rid of the rest of them. That's ego. That's your ego,
yeah,
right? That's
absolutely.
and I'm also not one of those people saying that ego is a bad thing because ego is important. You need to integrate it. But if you don't, you can clearly
Yeah,
see in the world today what happens when a person's ego is out of control, right? It's
yeah,
a
absolutely.
disaster.
Yeah, there is a way to integrate, and that's what shadow work is. It's the integration of the ego into a way that cooperates with the rest of your existence. And this is what, Aleister Crowley and so many other occultists who were dabbling in early goetic magic, were trying to tell us was that basically we are wrangling forces, that whether they're within us or without us, whatever, we are wrangling forces of different parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I mean, that's one of the biggest lessons of any magic that involves demons, from my experience. You have to do a tremendous amount of shadow work. You will be confronted with your deepest traumas, and not only that, but your biases. Demons will bring you your biases and say, "What is this?" you know?
Yeah.
And I have had those moments so many times, and that's kind of what has changed the way I think, because I look now at like the state of my mind now versus when I was a pastor, and I'm able to comprehend things in such a more level-headed um, manner, a more mature manner, a more confident manner. I'm able to tackle things in my life with so much more vigor and confidence than I could back then when I was truthfully like ensnared by that entity and kind of inhabiting those mentalities.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, dead on correct, man. I say I love these conversations. I love talking to other occultists who are not at the beginning of their journey. I love talking to
Yeah,
them also. I think that's very important. But I love talking to people who kind of are past all that.
yeah,
Because it's a great conversation. I am part of a group on Facebook. It's called
yeah,
Witchcraft for Beginners, and I try to just be a voice of reason in there, and I give advice when people ask for it. But what you see, and it's starting to be overwhelming for me to be honest. But like most of the time, you'll see somebody come in and ask a good question about occultism, and they just get berated by people who say that I've been a witch for 35 years or something like that,
yeah,
and tell them they're doing it wrong and how dare you and blah blah. And it's just all
yeah,
talking down to people. And what the first thing I think, because I used to work in construction, and I was a drywaller, right? And I switched careers after 25 years, 20 a long ass time. I worked in the food industry. I was a chef, and then I couldn't do it anymore when my son was born because they're incompatible. So I started doing drywall, and I got really good at it really fast, and I loved doing it. And I would work with people who are like, I've been doing drywall for 20 years, and I'm like, yeah, well, you did it wrong for 20 years. Sorry. I don't know what to tell
Yeah,
you. This isn't good enough.
yeah, yeah,
And I feel that is so prevalent in the magical and witchcraft and spiritual communities. People again who conflate their own experience with objective truth,
yes,
and then
absolutely.
they become condescending and egotistical. They don't even realize they're doing it.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of elitism. I feel like that's on the rise within the occult community. Um, that's one thing that my group we have done. I'm very proud of like the group that I've assembled for like my staff team for my temple because we've done a very good job of kind of keeping that stuff at bay because we are trying to foster an environment where people can be open to whatever experience they want to have, and we will of course guide them toward healthy practices. And possibly there is a method that could be better for somebody that's more efficient or whatever that we want to share with them, but we're not going to badger them, push them down, and make them feel just as shitty as they would go into church. So
Yeah.
yeah,
My
that's
approach towards magic is very much like fuck around and find out. You know,
yeah,
that's what everyone should do. And you should make mistakes and you should have some maybe difficult experiences that lead you to greater realizations within your own practice. It's not always about doing everything the correct, safe way. I just did a panel over on my friend Ivy's channel that we do once in a while, and she had a great point about this. She's like, I don't recommend other people do this, but I'm very reckless with my magic because I want to know shit. I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
that's what you have to do sometimes. You have to,
yeah.
it's a choice you can make for yourself, but it's not one you want to push on other people. But you yourself, you can make any choices you want, and I think that that's very valuable, and we should never even a little bit try to take that away from people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm kind of that's a good way to put it. I feel like in a lot of ways I'm reckless too. But man, you've got to get into the dirt of things. You've got to get your hands on stuff and like that's just how you learn. And yeah, the occult world is sometimes a very spooky place, but man, it's fascinating the things for one thing that will happen from you and things that you will learn from your experiences. But you got to learn.
Yeah, you gotta learn and you gotta have experiences. I
Yeah.
think one thing that we have a tremendous problem, I don't know if it's a problem or just something I'm like, I don't know what to make of that, are so many people who are educated about the occult and do no magic. There's no experience. There's
Yeah.
just, I've read every book about occultism ever. I'm very confused and I don't really have a practice.
Yeah, yeah, I've run into that a lot too, and I was guilty of that in the beginning. I was very hesitant to put my knowledge into practice in the beginning just because it was so alien to me.
Yeah,
But I quickly found out that I would study for months all these different subjects, and then I would have one experience that lasted 5 minutes, and it would just scrap everything I had learned in six
totally.
months.
Yes. You can either bring it all together or say that was all a waste of time or whatever,
Mhm.
but these experiences are more powerful than the books or than the thoughts because they are very much feeling experiences, right? They're
Yeah,
they're about the emotion or the feel of what is going on. And this is another one where, and this is true for me because I'm not like a super strong visualizer. I don't ever expect a spirit to materialize in front of me in a visual way, but I know when I'm in the presence of spirits because I experience it in different ways, right? Some people are very clairvoyant, but everyone wants it to be a material, objective reality thing. And I'm like, this is a feeling thing. This is something where
yeah.
you need to be turn your senses inward and experience the void, and in that void is where you will experience reality that's more real than waking reality.
Absolutely. Yeah, I also try to help people understand that because I get a lot of my clients who come to me and I do a lot of coaching with goetic work.
Mhm.
Um, and that's the biggest thing I run into is how can I make a demon appear in front of me? And I always
Yeah.
try to get people to shift the mindset from, well, for one thing, it's not about getting the demon to appear in front of you.
Yeah.
You need to go into the ritual with another intention, for one thing, because demons don't respect that motive. But it's so much less about the the paranormal phenomenon that people crave. It's so much more about like the inner sight, the kind of the
Mhm.
knowing that you receive from spirit contact. And it's sometimes not even a knowing that you can put into words. It's not something that you can communicate to other humans in the exact same way as you felt it. Sometimes
Yeah.
it is something that is so psychic and so subtle that you're only going to get that through spirit contact, and it's not something that is objective. It's not something that's physical. It's not something that's just going to manifest and appear in front of you. You know, this is something that is very internal. And now, yes, I have had things appear in front of me, and I have seen spirits, and those things do happen, but I would say that is a 1 in 10 scenario. Usually, the other 9 scenarios are the psychic internal. Sometimes you see things in your mind's eye, but very much so you are feeling things. You are receiving gnosis through a connection almost, or something along those lines, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, totally. And that experience is it's better, it's more powerful. The visual
Yeah,
aspect of it, whatever, it's not important to me. There's lots of visual ways to experience magic, tarot, candle magic, spell work,
yeah,
scrying, all of these things, right? I would not want a spirit to manifest right in front of me, because I would immediately go to the hospital and say I think I'm schizophrenic. Like that would be the
yeah,
first thing that I would do. I would
yeah,
be very concerned that there is something wrong with
yeah.
me. I've had spirits manifest close enough to a physical thing,
Mm.
and this happened mostly in a haunted place where it was deeply unpleasant, and I don't want to
Yeah.
experience that again.
Yeah, yeah. That's also a very common thing. Is people come to me and they say, I can't tell if I'm schizophrenic or if I'm having an actual spiritual experience.
Yeah,
And I always say to rule out the mundane first.
yeah,
Be rational about it, be practical first. So sometimes that means going to a doctor and saying, hey, I'm having these experiences. Am I schizophrenic? Please test me. And that's exactly what I did. And I was found to not have schizophrenia. And so, then at that point, you're like, okay, now what do I do with this information?
yeah,
So then it goes on from there. But definitely, some of those experiences will make you think something is wrong with you, or make you think that you're having some kind of a psychotic break, or whatever. And while those things are like, definitely there's odds of that happening, if you're able to keep your head on, if you're able to eliminate the mundane, you can go amazing places with that.
yeah. Yeah, you absolutely can. And you can gain information that, like you said, it's hard to articulate to other people. But for you personally, it'll be a life-changing experience. It'll change the way you see reality, the way you experience reality, and it's so very worth it. Um, so if there's what's the central message of your work, if you
The
have one? Mhm.
Yeah, the essential message of my work is kind of not to not to dismiss what is conventionally seen as evil, but rather try to understand it and learn from it, see how it can be integrated into your life, how it can create a more fulfilling life, and how you can learn to love life more from it. Because a lot of what people say is evil, what people say is dark. Again, that's a subjective interpretation, like we talked about. Um, but my core message to people is to find that gnosis in the way that makes the most sense to them, and that may not be demons, that may not be anything dark, that may be something very benevolent and light filled. It's different for everybody, but really my main goal is to just create a space where people can be witches and can be occultists and not feel afraid of what they're doing. And to me, that's a very fulfilling motive personally. I seek to help people understand themselves as well as the spiritual reality in which they exist in. I very much want to help people expand their consciousness,
Yeah.
in not just um, in a superficial sense, but in a way that is the most enriching to their life.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. It's awesome. I think I think you've really hit the nail on the head with what occultism is all about, with that message. And I think we need to work towards, as educators, is just reminding people, because this is so dead obvious, but it's like people forget this, Good and evil are measures of your actions in life and nothing else. They are not measures of, you hear people say tarot is evil, astrology is evil. I'm like, no, hurting people is evil.
Yes.
Harming
Yes.
people is evil, malicious intent. But the intent to gain knowledge and seek wisdom, certainly not evil. Karma is real. The word karma simply means action.
Yeah.
All it means, your karma is what you do. It's what you
Yeah.
do. It is not a set of symbols. It's not a color. It's not a location. It's not a deity. It is your actions in life.
Exactly. And I've always said that if you need religion to tell you what's good and evil, and if you need a religion to tell you, to create this concept of hell for you to be afraid of, that if you're a good person, you won't go there. If it takes the concept of hell, to keep you from doing bad things, you're not a good person, you know. So you should do good things because it's the right thing to do, not because of fear of damnation, fear of, brimstone and hellfire and all that kind of stuff. You should do good because it's good, not
Yeah.
because, it's just, and it shouldn't be that, hard. But for whatever reason, it is.
One of the obvious, well, to be fair, this is not obvious when you're a child. It's not obvious to a
Sure.
teenager either. But as an adult, it becomes incredibly obvious if you have any level of self-awareness whatsoever that if you want to feel good, do good. When you
Yeah.
do good, you feel good. For some reason, we are wired the other way around, very much so as kids, that we always want to take the easy way out. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, if you want to love your life, do everything the slow, hard way. You will love your life. If you
Yeah.
constantly try to find an easy way out of your responsibilities, you will have a miserable life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
So
is the path that invites a lot of misery onto yourself. But yeah.
it definitely does. Anyways, Dorian, I've got to run, but it was awesome. This was a great conversation. I love having you here. I'd love to have you back because I've got a whole other list of things we could talk about. So thank you
Absolutely.
very much for being on the show. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it as well. I would be happy to come back. This was awesome.
Awesome. And if people want to get in touch with you or look for your work, where can they find you?
They can find it. You can go to cyphergrove.com. That has a lot of the links to different places you can find me, a lot of information about my work. You can also go to vesperitas.com, which is more focused on my temple group. So either of those websites, you'll be able to find everything there.
Okay, awesome. And I will include those links in the description for the episode. So once again, Dorian, thank you so much. And bye, everybody.